Okay, this is our temperature converter app tutorial where you'll be making a temperature converter app for Fahrenheit and Celsius. Okay, now to be able to start this app, you need to access the three images provided to you via the website, and you will need to download these three images on the desktop you can see here onto your desktop as well. Now once you've downloaded these images, we can make a start on creating the Xcode project. So we'll open Xcode, go to the File menu and create a new project. It's an iOS application and it's a single view application, and this should open up selected by default when it appears on the screen. Click Next, and the product name is Temperature Converter. Organisation name is anything you want it to be. The language is Swift. The device is iPhone. Make sure the checkboxes down the bottom here are ticked, as was the case in the Hello World app, and then click Next. And we need to make sure that the source control create Git repository is selected, and we will create the app folder on the desktop by clicking Create, which is down the bottom right hand corner here. So all the files required to make the app have been created, and what we'll now do is click on the main storyboard here in the left hand project navigator. Now if the view controller scene appears just down the bottom here, just select or just click on the Hide Document Outline, and that will go away. Drag it across to give yourself a bit more room for the assistant editors, and just drag the object library up so you have a bit of room. So the object library should be selected, and the attributes inspector should be selected as well. Okay, once you've done that, scroll down to Label and drag a label onto your main storyboard. Make it a little bit bigger. You can actually specify the height and width. I'm going to make mine 110 by 70. You can see in the top left hand corner here, and I'll just zoom in so you can see it. A bit too much. That when I click on the handles, it will actually tell me the width and the height. So I want 110 by 70. Now if I can't do that by using, let me just get that right there. There we go. Well, I got it this time. No, I didn't. Okay, so if you can't get that, okay, what you can do is you can go to where the size is specified and change it manually over here. So it's up to you if you want to do it that way, or alternatively just use the handles to resize your labels. Now, when you've created one label, you can actually copy and paste to make more labels. Now, in this particular exercise, we need 4 labels. So we'll just copy and paste 4 times, and then we'll drag them across to here. Okay, and we also need a slider. So we'll put the slider in between the 4 labels. Okay, now we need to give these labels names. So this one here we will call Fahrenheit. This one underneath we'll call Celsius. So if you're not sure where you need to name it, it goes over here. The top right hand label, we'll change that to 32. And the bottom label, we will change to 0. Now for our slider, we actually need to provide some images. And what we need to do is we actually need to include the images in our Xcode project folder. Okay, so what we need to do So what we need to do is we need to go to the File menu and we need to select Add Files to Temperature Converter. We'll need to navigate to the desktop and we will need to select the 3 images on our desktop and click on Add down the bottom. Okay, once we've done that, you can see the images have appeared here in our Navigator margin. We'll then click on the slider and we should be able to select from our drop down list on the right hand side from our assistant editor the minimum image for the slider, which will be freezing, and the maximum image for our slider, which will be boiling. And you should see the images appear at the beginning of the slider and at the end of the slider. Okay, now what you need to do with these tutorials is to pick up on the skills that you learn in each tutorial, as you will need to apply them in subsequent apps that you make. And what you'll need to do is apply the skills that you learned from the auto layout tutorial to this particular exercise. Now, I'm not going to do this for you. You'll need to do it at the end, after you have completed and successfully built the app and run it. Okay. So what we'll do now is we will go to the view controller, and what we need to do is, I'll just zoom in so you can see it more clearly, is that we need to link our objects to the code. Alright, so let's bring up our assistant editor, and let's change that to the main storyboard so we can see our objects. And of course we have our view controller.swift file here in the assistant editor. I'll just zoom in so you can see it more clearly. What we need to do here in our class view controller is we'll just return, press the enter key several times to give ourselves a bit of room. And what we need to do is we need to link these objects with the code that we are about to write. Okay, now we have a number of objects here, a number of items that we need to declare. So we'll go ahead and do that now. First one is Fahrenheit. Right click on Fahrenheit, hold the mouse button down, drag it across to the view controller.swift file, let go of the mouse button. Okay, and we need to call this label Fahrenheit. Make sure you get the spelling right. We have Celsius, so we'll do the same with Celsius. We have the slider. Now we're going to call this SLI Celsius, because remember we don't have the same name for Celsius, which is the label, and the same name for the slider. That will cause a lot of problems. Now we'll just space everything a bit more closely. Okay, now what we need to do is again, we need to right click on the slider, drag the mouse across to the view controller.swift file, then let go of the mouse button. And this time what we need to do is we need to call this connection not an outlet but an action. So if you could click on action here, and the name we will give this action is change temp. Now just to put you in the picture of what's happening here, in case you're not sure, the user will move the slider. Okay, so it's an action that's being performed, and the user will be able to manipulate or change the values in the labels by moving the slider left or right. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to call that UI slider. The event is value changed. Okay, now you might remember in the Hello World app we had touch up inside, but on this occasion it's value changed. The arguments is sender, and then we click on connect. Now you can see here it's created a function for us to work with. Now, as I just explained a minute ago, what we need to do with this app is to enable the user to move the slider left and right, and for these values to change. So, we need to be able to tell the computer the values that have been sent from this slider. Now, if this slider is in the middle, and if you remember, the values that we set for the slider as a minimum was 0 to 100, let's say that's now at 50. We need to be able to tell the computer that the user has selected the value 50, and to then convert that 50 from Celsius to Fahrenheit. Okay, so we need to be able to assign the value from the slider to memory using a variable, or in this case we'll be using a constant. So how does that look in code? Well, let's just type it up here so you can have a look and see. We type in let, and we create a constant called temp C equals. Now the value of temp will be an integer, and it's the sender value that we want to assign to the constant temp C. So that's going to store the value of the slider, the value on the slider, into the constant temp C in memory. Now, the next part of our app requires us to be able to calculate the conversion. Right, so the conversion from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So if the Celsius temperature is a certain value, we need to convert it and then assign that to the Fahrenheit constant. So we've created a constant now called temp F. And temp F will equal whatever temp C is. Remember temp C up here, that's been assigned from the slider value, times 9 divided by 5 plus 32. Okay, so that's the formula you need to be able to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit. Now hopefully that's made sense. Okay, I've tried to go through that slowly because it is a bit of a steep learning curve. This is the first time you've been dealing with variables, constants, and calculations, and how to display user input onto the screen. So, as I just said, the last part involves putting the user input onto the screen. And how do we do that? Well, what we need to do is we need to type in Fahrenheit, if you remember that label up here, Fahrenheit, dot text equals backward slash, open brackets, whatever the value of temp F is. So we've got to put temp F in here. Let's get rid of that, that shouldn't be there. Close the brackets, close the quotation marks. Likewise, we'll do the same for Celsius. So we'll type in Celsius dot text same syntax as above, and this time it will be temp C. Close the brackets, close the apostrophe. Okay. Now you'll notice that with our function, a function always contains an opening braces and a closing braces where the function ends. Okay, so this IB action function called change temp is all contained within these two braces. Now it's very important to be able to take note of the syntax and structure of the code so that you can apply this to any future apps that require you to perform calculations or that require you to be able to store values, user values in memory, which you can then manipulate to then output either as a calculation or something else. And you'll learn a bit more about that using playgrounds as well. Okay. Now, there don't seem to be any errors appearing. All of our objects are connected, and we can see that by moving our mouse pointer over our objects. They're all linked to the codes, so that's good. That's what we want. So what we'll do is we'll give it a go and we'll run it. Remembering, of course, that I haven't set up the auto layout on this particular app. I'll need you to do that yourself. So if you don't remember how to do it, go back to the previous tutorial, have a look at that tutorial and apply what was shown there in this app, in this temperature converter app, to see if you can set it up so that it looks neat and tidy, both in portrait view and landscape view. So I'll just run this app now to see if it runs. Okay, so you can see we have our app that's been built. If we move the slider, it doesn't actually work, we've made a mistake. So what we need to do is go back and check what we've done incorrectly, which seems to be the Fahrenheit labels here. We'll just change that and see if we can get that to work. Now I think the problem is that we've incorrectly connected the Celsius label with Celsius rather than the 0. So what we'll need to do is we'll just do that now. We'll just reconnect these variables to the correct labels, and the Fahrenheit needs to go to 32 here. Okay, so that's now connected correctly. However, because we've connected two labels, what we'll need to do is quickly go to our standard editor, okay, and we'll need to go to our connections inspector, which is the icon up here, and we'll also need to go to our view controller so that we can actually look at our connections. And you'll see over here that the connections that we need are not in the right place. Just double check that again. No, that's right now. Okay, so that's right now. Just need to double check to make sure everything's correct. Okay, so we'll give it a go and run that again. That should work this time. There's something wrong with our slider. Go back to our slider for a minute and see what minimum values we've given it, and there we go, there's our problem. So our slider should have been assigned 100 there as maximum. Minimum should have been 0, not minus 0, just 0, and the increment is 1. Okay, so that should work now. So let's go back to saving it and running it. Okay, so there we go. It actually works. Okay, so there you have it. There's one functioning temperature converter. You'll always make mistakes in apps. As you can see, I even make them myself. It's just a case of going through, rechecking what you've done wrong to see what it is you can do to fix it up. And in particular with code, you know, if you have any red dots appearing that require debugging, then you just need to go through it methodically. Maybe have a look at the error warnings and see what recommendations the program comes up with. But yeah, it's just a case of going through, methodically checking what you've done to see that it's been connected correctly, and you should have success. Okay, hopefully that's helped you in creating your temperature converter app. Like I said, you'll need to spend a bit of time on your own fixing up the auto layout. Okay, and remember, of course, you can access auto layout by going to the assistant editor and selecting the crossed over circles, okay, the intersecting circles, going to the preview function down the bottom and selecting main storyboard preview. And then from there you can actually fix up the layout of your app so that it actually presents neatly in both portrait view and layout view. Good luck with that, and we'll see you in the next tutorial.